The desert night trembled under the weight of silence, and then a gunshot tore through the stillness like thunder. Jack Donovan said, "Redemption is a fool's prize, but I'm bound to chase it." He stood at the edge of the dying campfire, his revolver smoking, his eyes fixed on the horizon where darkness met dawn. The coyotes howled as if mocking him, and his chest tightened with the memory of blood already spilled. A riderless horse bolted past, its hooves carving panic into the dust. Jack clenched his jaw and whispered to no one, "Every step forward means more blood, and the desert is thirsty still." The sun rose sluggishly, painting the desert in copper fire, and Jack trudged toward the ghost town ahead. His boots sank into sand, as if the earth itself wanted to hold him back. He muttered, "The town's bones hide more sins than mine ever could." Wooden signs creaked in the wind, broken windows stared like hollow eyes, and every step echoed across dead streets. Jack's grip tightened around his revolver, not from fear but from memory. He thought of blood spilled here years ago, debts unpaid, and shadows that still whispered his name. Inside the abandoned saloon, dust hung like smoke in broken sunlight, and Jack pushed through swinging doors that groaned in protest. Bottles shattered long ago littered the bar, and chairs lay scattered like bodies after a fight. He whispered, "This place remembers." His reflection stared back at him from a cracked mirror, older, harder, but not forgiven. The piano keys were stained with dust, as though waiting for one last song, and the air reeked of stale sorrow. His hand trembled as he reached for a bottle, then pulled back, choosing the weight of silence instead. The sound of spurs rattled from the doorway, and a young voice broke the silence. Thomas Reed said, "Didn't think I'd find you here." Jack turned, seeing the boy who once idolized him now hardened by years. Thomas, barely 20, wore a borrowed gun belt too heavy for his frame. Jack's jaw clenched. He said, "You shouldn't be here, kid." Thomas smirked, though his eyes betrayed fear. "You owe me answers," he replied. Dust swirled between them, as silence threatened to choke both men. The wind slammed the saloon doors as Jack and Thomas faced each other, silence louder than gunfire. Jack said, "You're chasing ghosts, boy, and they'll bury you." Thomas's fists tightened around the grip of his revolver, though he dared not draw. His voice cracked. "You left me nothing but questions." Jack exhaled sharply, pain buried under grit. He thought of debts unpaid, blood that chained him, and the key he sought for redemption. But every path ahead promised only more graves. The church bell tower loomed over the town square, cracked and rusting, tolling once as if mocking salvation. Jack Donovan stood at its base, shadows dragging across his face. He muttered, "Redemption hides in places where no man of God walks." Thomas Reed followed, boots scuffing the stones, voice shaking as he said, "You were here to settle with him, aren't you?" Jack's jaw hardened, the memory of betrayal cutting deeper than any blade. He whispered, "The lawman wears the mask of justice, but his soul is black as coal." The bell rang again, echoing through empty streets like a funeral dirge. Inside the church, pews lay rotting, dust coating every surface like judgment unspoken. Jack's eyes narrowed on the altar, where symbols of faith had been defiled. He whispered, "This place reeks of lies." Thomas said, "Maybe you see what you want to see." Jack turned sharply, fire in his gaze, and growled, "I see the truth, boy. Men like him bend God to their will." The stained glass cracked under sunlight, casting jagged colors across the floor, and the silence pressed heavy, as if the walls themselves bore witness to sins long hidden. From the shadows, an older voice rasped like sandpaper. "Elijah Grant," said the desert, "don't forgive, and neither do men." Jack turned to face his old mentor, scarred and limping, leaning on a cane carved from mesquite. Elijah, now past 60, looked at him with weary eyes. Jack said, "You taught me the gun solves nothing, yet here I am." Elijah's gaze softened. "Because redemption ain't free, boy, and the price is always blood." Thomas shifted uneasily, glancing between them, the weight of their words heavy in the dusty air. The church doors slammed open as Sheriff Cole Hammond entered, boots echoing across the broken floorboards. His uniform shone clean against the decay, a silver badge glinting in dawn light. Jack spat. "You wear law like armor, but beneath it you're nothing but rot." Hammond smirked, his voice calm as poison. "And you're still the outlaw who mistakes vengeance for virtue." Thomas's hand twitched near his revolver, but Elijah lifted a hand to still him. The silence grew brittle, ready to break under the weight of old grudges and fresh lies. The sheriff's words dripped with venom as he said, "The desert drinks all sins, Donovan, yours most of all." Jack's eyes burned, and his hand hovered near his holster. Elijah whispered, "Don't draw unless you're ready to bury yourself too." Thomas stepped forward, voice trembling. "This isn't justice, it's power twisted." Hammond laughed coldly. "Justice is what I say it is." The stained glass rattled as wind screamed through cracks in the walls, and in that moment Jack realized the blood yet to be spilled would drown them all. The saloon filled with whispers as townsfolk watched from shadowed corners, their eyes darting toward Jack Donovan and Sheriff Hammond. Jack said, "Your law has left graves, not justice." Hammond's smirk cut sharp. "And your sins have built them." Thomas Reed clenched his fists, eyes restless, while Elijah Grant leaned heavy on his cane, silence pressing on him like years of guilt. The crowd muttered, fear and curiosity weaving like smoke. Jack knew every man here measured him by the weight of his past, and the desert itself seemed to close in, demanding more blood. A glass shattered against the bar as Jack slammed his hand down, voice echoing like thunder. "Truth is carved in the bones of this town." Hammond replied, smooth and venomous, "Truth belongs to the man who survives." Thomas's voice cracked, "Then survival ain't worth a damn." Elijah exhaled, weary, his eyes carrying the weight of old regrets. The room thickened with tension, every creak of wood and clink of spurs, a threat waiting to ignite. Jack's hand hovered near his holster, but it wasn't drawn yet. The doors swung open, and Evelyn Hart entered, her beauty shadowed by sharp eyes that revealed old secrets. She said, "Men like you argue while the desert takes its toll." Jack stiffened. Her voice carried both temptation and betrayal. Hammond smirked, tipping his hat toward her. Thomas whispered, "Who is she?" Jack muttered, "The one who'll decide who walks away." Evelyn's gaze lingered on Jack, a flicker of regret buried beneath the mystery. But the air between them was barbed with unfinished history. Evelyn's heels clicked across the floorboards, each step cutting through silence. She said, "Redemption's a key men kill for, and I hold it." Jack's jaw clenched, his voice low. "Keys open doors, but some led straight to hell." Hammond laughed. "And yet you'll still follow her." Thomas's hands shook at his sides, torn between fear and loyalty. Elijah muttered, "The desert don't deal in second chances." Evelyn's eyes burned with secrets, and for a moment Jack saw the path ahead written in blood. The silence cracked as a pistol fired from the shadows, the bullet splintering a whiskey bottle near Jack's head. Chaos erupted, townsfolk scattered, screams rising. Jack drew his revolver, eyes searching for the shooter hidden in smoke. Hammond ducked low, smirking, his hand never leaving his gun. Evelyn's face betrayed no fear, only cold calculation. Thomas shouted, "They're trying to bury us alive." Elijah gritted his teeth, whispering, "And the desert drinks deeper still." Jack felt the weight of fate pressing harder, redemption slipping farther with each echoing shot. The night swallowed the town as lanterns flickered weakly, their light struggling against the desert wind. Jack Donovan stood outside the saloon, revolver heavy at his side, his voice low. "Every truth bleeds before it heals." Thomas Reed watched nervously, shadows stretching his young face, as if fear aged him too soon. Elijah Grant leaned against a post, muttering, "Blood begets blood, Boyd." Evelyn Hart emerged from the darkness, her expression unreadable, eyes glinting like secrets not yet spoken. Jack's chest tightened, suspicion clawing at him, knowing betrayal always waited closest to the heart. Evelyn's voice cut through the night like a blade. "You think redemption's found in a graveyard of men? You're no savior, Jack." His jaw clenched, bitterness rising. "I never claimed to be," he said. Sheriff Hammond's laughter echoed as he stepped from the darkness, badge gleaming. "You're both liars clinging to lost causes." Thomas's hand drifted near his revolver, fear battling courage in his eyes. Elijah exhaled sharply, whispering, "Don't be the spark, boy, or we all burn." The desert wind howled, carrying the promise of blood yet to be spilled. Tension snapped as Hammond barked, "Seize them." His deputies poured into the street, rifles glinting in lantern light. Jack drew his revolver, firing once into the dirt, sending echoes bouncing through the town. Evelyn whispered, "You'll drown in this blood, Jack." Thomas's heart pounded as he shouted, "We fight or we fall." Elijah limped forward, his voice cracking like old wood. "This ends with coffins, no matter the side." The townsfolk slammed shutters closed, leaving only the outlaws, the law, and the desert as witnesses. The trap had finally closed. Gunfire erupted, thunder rolling across the desert. Jack's shots cracked with fury, every bullet carving through Hammond's men. Thomas stumbled behind a trough, firing wildly, his youthful face twisted by fear and determination. Evelyn ducked low, her eyes never leaving Jack, torn between loyalty and survival. Elijah's cane clattered to the ground as he dragged one deputy down with surprising strength, his old rage flaring once more. Hammond stood calm, untouched, his smirk unshaken. "The desert won't save you," he taunted. Jack growled back, "It never did." The street fell silent, corpses scattered under moonlight, blood soaking into thirsty dust. Jack's revolver smoked, his chest heaving as rage wrestled guilt. Thomas clutched his arm, grazed by a bullet, his voice shaking. "We're not heroes, Jack." Elijah retrieved his cane, eyes hollow with grief. "You think this ends with redemption? It only ends with more graves." Evelyn stepped forward, her face pale, whispering, "The key I hold is heavier than chains." Hammond's shadow loomed from the far end, his smirk cutting through the smoke. Jack knew the storm had only just begun. The wind carried silence heavy as death, broken only by Evelyn Hart's trembling words. "The key isn't redemption, Jack. It's proof. Proof you killed a man who never drew first." Jack's breath caught, rage and denial twisting inside him. Thomas Reed's eyes widened, voice cracking, "That's why they hunted you." Elijah Grant lowered his gaze, muttering, "Some truths buried deeper than graves." Jack staggered, the memory of a gunfight years past clawing into him, his mind replaying shadows and screams. Hammond's smirk widened, every word a blade. "Redemption is a lie, Donovan, and you built it on blood." Jack's revolver hand shook as truth clawed at him. He whispered, "I saw his eyes. He was reaching for steel." Evelyn's tone cracked with sorrow. "He reached for nothing, Jack. You drew on a ghost." Thomas' chest heaved, voice raw. "You lied to yourself, and you dragged us with you." Elijah stepped closer, his voice heavy with regret. "I told you once, boy. The desert don't forgive what you take from it." Hammond's voice rose, triumphant. "Your redemption was built on a corpse. Now the whole town sees it." Jack felt his knees weaken beneath the crushing weight of guilt. The crowd emerged from doorways and alleys, whispers thick as smoke. Faces filled with anger, fear, betrayal. Hammond shouted, "This outlaw killed an innocent and he dares call it justice." Jack's voice thundered, desperate, "I bled for truth, not lies." Evelyn's eyes shimmered with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "I tried to save you from yourself." Thomas's chest swelled with pain, muttering, "All this time, chasing a ghost." Elijah tapped his cane, murmuring, "The price was always waiting." The night closed in tighter, every eye fixed on Jack as if judgment had finally arrived. Evelyn stepped closer, holding a folded paper bound with dust and time. "This is the affidavit," she said, voice breaking. The dying man cleared his name with his last breath. "Hammond buried it, and I carried it." Jack's eyes burned with betrayal, snarling, "You held this truth while I drowned in blood." Hammond's laugh split the night. "And she played you like a fiddle." Thomas shouted, fury tearing through him. "You all let this town rot." Elijah's whisper carried sorrow. The key was never freedom. It was chains. The desert air stung like truth itself, cutting skin. Jack staggered, his revolver slipping from his grip into the dust. The crowd gasped as silence smothered the street. He whispered, "If redemption was built on lies, then I'm already damned." Evelyn's face hardened, torn between love and guilt. Hammond sneered, raising his revolver. "The desert drinks liars first." Thomas moved instinctively, stepping between Jack and Hammond, shouting, "You'll have to go through me." Elijah's voice thundered one last time. "No one walks from this without a grave waiting." The night pulsed with inevitability, every soul knowing the desert demanded more blood. The town square burned with lantern fire and fury as Sheriff Hammond raised his revolver, his voice thundering, "This ends with your blood, Donovan." Jack's hand hovered near his holster, sweat glistening under moonlight, but his eyes no longer feared death. He said, "If I fall facing truth." Evelyn Hart stepped back, torn between her secrets and her heart. Thomas Reed stood trembling yet defiant, whispering, "We stand or we die." Elijah Grant gripped his cane like a weapon, growling, "I buried too many to see the desert win again." The night prepared to swallow them whole. Gunfire cracked, echoing like thunder rolling across the desert. Jack's revolver flared. Hammond's bullet answered, sparks splitting the night. Evelyn screamed, clutching her chest as a stray shot grazed her shoulder. Thomas dropped to the ground, firing blindly with trembling hands, his face streaked with dust and fear. Elijah limped forward into the fray, swinging his cane against a deputy, his rage reigniting. Jack shouted, "This blood won't wash the desert clean." Hammond snarled back, "It never had to." The air thickened with smoke, screams, and vengeance unchained. Jack and Hammond closed the distance, each shot tearing chunks from walls and ground. The world narrowed to two men bound by hate. Jack's voice roared, "Your law was built on lies." Hammond's reply cut cold, "And yours on blood." Evelyn staggered, eyes burning as she cried, "Stop before the desert buries us all." Thomas's shout pierced the chaos, "Jack, end this!" Elijah fell to one knee, wounded, blood staining the dust beneath him, whispering, "Don't waste what little life is left." The square became an arena, the desert demanding sacrifice. The two men met at the center, revolvers empty, fists replacing bullets. Jack slammed Hammond against the church wall, snarling, "You buried truth beneath corpses." Hammond struck back, spitting blood. The strong decide truth. Evelyn fell to her knees, eyes wide, as Thomas pulled her back from crossfire. Elijah groaned, clutching his wound, whispering prayers for an end. The crowd watched from alleys, silent, the town holding its breath. Every strike between Jack and Hammond felt like history itself being rewritten in blood and dust. Jack's fist crushed against Hammond's jaw, and the sheriff staggered, revolver slipping from his hand. The outlaw pressed his barrel against Hammond's chest, sweat and blood mingling on his face. The crowd froze, breathless, as silence wrapped the square. Evelyn whispered, "Don't damn yourself further." Thomas shouted, "End it the right way." Elijah's weak voice croaked, "Choose redemption, boy, or the desert will claim you whole." Hammond's smirk faltered, fear flickering at last in his eyes. Jack's hand trembled, caught between vengeance and salvation, as dawn's first light pierced the horizon. The square held its breath as dawn spilled over rooftops, painting blood and dust in gold. Jack Donovan stood with revolver pressed to Hammond's chest, his hand trembling between vengeance and mercy. Evelyn Hart's voice cracked, "If you pull that trigger, the desert wins again." Thomas Reed stepped closer, face hardened by youth stolen too soon, whispering, "Choose life, Jack. Elijah Grant, barely clinging to consciousness, rasped, "Redemption don't come by spilling more blood." Hammond's smirk faltered, his arrogance bending under fear. The choice hung heavier than the rising sun, shaping the fate of every soul watching. Jack's revolver lowered slowly, his eyes burning with both fury and grief. He said, "The desert already drank enough." Hammond exhaled in disbelief, a bitter laugh escaping. Mercy won't save you. Thomas shouted. No, but it saves us from being like you. Evelyn clutched her wound, whispering, You chose the harder road, Jack. Elijah nodded faintly, pride flickering in his weary eyes. The crowd shifted, murmurs of fear giving way to awe. For the first time, the outlaw's shadow seemed lighter, though the weight of his past still chained him. Mercy had bought him nothing, except his soul. The silence shattered as Hammond lunged, knife flashing from his belt. Jack twisted, firing one last shot that split the morning with thunder. Hammond collapsed, his smirk gone, eyes wide in disbelief as life bled from him. Jack stood frozen, revolver smoking, face carved with sorrow. Evelyn whispered, The desert claimed him at last. Thomas gritted his teeth, muttering, He chose his own grave. Elijah coughed, blood on his lips, murmuring, No man escapes the price. The townsfolk bowed their heads, knowing justice and vengeance had become one, and the desert had finally drunk its fill. Jack dropped his revolver into the dust, the sound echoing louder than any gunshot. He whispered, Redemption isn't mine to hold. Evelyn reached for him, her eyes torn with regret, but her hand trembled and fell short. Thomas stood tall, scarred by loss but hardened by truth, saying, You showed me mercy matters, even if it costs everything. Elijah closed his eyes, breath fading, murmuring, Then maybe, you've learned what I never did. The townsfolk stepped forward, their silence neither forgiveness nor condemnation, only witness. The desert wind carried Jack's words away, leaving only scars in the sand. The sun rose fully, burning away shadows, as Jack walked from the square, his figure small against endless desert horizon. Behind him lay corpses, silence and truths too heavy for one man. Evelyn whispered, He carries the weight alone. Thomas stood rooted, torn between following and staying, his youth bound forever to the blood-stained dawn. Elijah's body stilled, his final lesson etched into dust. The townsfolk whispered prayers, not for heroes but for survival. Jack never looked back. His path stretched endless, each step a burden, each breath a penance. The desert had not forgiven, but it let him walk.